Sure, definitely. Yeah, great to.
You know that I'm working out here in California now.
Yeah, I remember last time I saw you, you're moving out here.
Yeah.
So you're permanently.
We've been working away. So.
Are you in Northern California?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
You should check in at some point. I'd love to.
Are you going to LA next week?
I'm not gonna. I have another event happening that same night.
Oh, okay.
Are you gonna be there?
Yeah, apparently.
You should. I'm gonna be there.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mark. Nice to meet you. Sure.
You okay? Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome. My name is Rose Braz. I'm with the Center for Biological Diversity. Thank you. You are very kind, and thank you so much for taking the time and spending it here with us for, I think, what's going to be a really enlightening, inspiring, and different conversation than we've had previously about climate and the work we all are doing, because I recognize a lot of you doing tremendous work all over the state and the world. When we started to think about this event, at the Center for Biological Diversity, we spent a lot of time trying to reduce greenhouse gas pollution, as many of you have, all of you have in some ways, I'm sure. And we also started to think about more and more our work, while we still do direct work to reduce greenhouse gas pollution, we're doing more and more work aimed at keeping fossil fuels in the ground. And we started to think about, like, how did that happen? You know, what is that shift? What does that look like? And what does that mean for the climate movement? And particularly focused on keeping fossil fuels in the ground that are extracted by extreme methods like fracking and other forms of unconventional extraction, and oil extraction that's happening near communities and near hospitals and schools, et cetera. Those are the types of things we find ourselves fighting more and more. And while we've always fought bad projects as a movement, I think what's happening is we're fighting those projects, bad projects, and we're fighting projects on a global climate change agenda. So more and more, I think we're seeing that happening. And particularly here in California, we know that we live in the number 3 oil-producing state in the country. We're behind Texas and North Dakota, but in this place we think of as very green and very climate-friendly and very climate-forward thinking, we still are the 3rd largest oil-producing state in the country. And how does that fit in with climate leadership, or in our case, we believe it does not fit in with climate leadership. So what we're hoping to do tonight is to discuss both ends of the spectrum, the efforts to reduce consumption of fossil fuels and the efforts that we're all undertaking to reduce and eliminate production of fossil fuels, particularly here in California. We thought about putting this event together. We thought, who would be a good moderator for it? And we immediately thought of our good colleague here, Strella Servas at the California Environmental Justice Alliance. And we thought of Strella because her work has bridged both of these strategies. She's done a ton of work to bring renewable energy and solar in particular to communities of color through CEJA's Energy Equity Program in particular, and she's done an amazing amount of work also fighting dirty energy. So we thought Strella would be the perfect moderator, and we're so happy that she agreed to join us here tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Strella Servas to take us through the evening's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. And can everybody hear me? Yeah. Yes. Okay, great. Wonderful. Hello. Thank you so much, Rose and the CBD, for having me at this space. I'm actually based in LA. Was here for the past couple of days doing some energy planning. So I'm not in Berkeley very often, so it's very nice to be here and with you all. So thank you so much. So I'm going to talk about California and just kind of give ourselves a little bit of context and framework of what I see in terms of the landscape. I see 2 things. One is California is in a period of immense challenges right now. The climate crisis is ravaging through our state. California is experiencing some of the worst periods of drought in our history. with human emissions intensifying the drought by 15 to 20% in California. We see big oil industry like Chevron, which is in Richmond, based in Richmond, continue to completely disregard the local community's health and well-being. And even with California now almost transitioning completely off of coal, a lot of what California is doing is replacing the coal industry with the natural gas industry, which we know is also very dirty and can be even more dirty than other forms of energy. Neighborhood drilling and oil extraction continue to pose serious threats to nearby homes and schools and places of work. And with the oil development causing headaches, we get reports of nosebleeds, respiratory illnesses, and even the oil drilling and extraction is also linked to cancer, which we experience a lot in the communities that we work with. And the practice of fracking, as we all know, in California is booming right now. California's Central Valley sits on one of the largest known oil reserves in the country, the Monterey Shale. And that industry has been feverishly extracting this oil through a process known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. And it uses a massive amount of water that can pollute our air, our soil, and even our drinking water. And despite the recent attempts by all of us in this room collectively and beyond in our communities to attempt to rein in fracking, it still remains largely unregulated in California. And so the second thing I see in California's landscape, besides all of these challenges, is California is also in a period of tremendous opportunity right now. The whole nation is really looking to California to set the stage and pass cutting-edge climate and energy policies that are innovative and can really set the tone for the entire nation. And people are really looking to California to confront this climate crisis, to confront big oil, to confront big industry. And in fact, just a couple of months ago, recently, California passed huge, big, major legislation that would move us away from dirty fossil fuels and bring in more renewable energy, especially in those most impacted communities. So folks in the room probably know about a landmark legislation called SB 350 by the President of the Senate, Kevin De Leon, who is from LA, where I work. And that particular bill is one of the most forward-thinking in the nation. It would bring in 50%, increase the renewable energy in California to 50% by 2030, and double energy efficiency in buildings also by 2030. And that's a bill that we, as the EJ community, helped to push forward. Another bill that a lot of folks don't know about is AB 693 by Assemblymember Eggman, Susan Eggman, who is based in Stockton. And this is a bill that I'm most proud of. It's a bill that would bring in solar, give renters in multifamily affordable housing access to solar, and actually put 300 megawatts of solar on multifamily affordable housing roofs. It actually is the largest investment of solar in environmental justice communities in the nation. And this just recently passed. And it's so programs like these that will help California move away from fossil fuels while transitioning to 100% clean renewable energy. With these programs and these policies, we continue to ask ourselves, who will be the most impacted by our state's actions and who stands to benefit the most? It's really low-income communities and communities of color that face many, many long-standing environmental injustices, continued legacies of disinvestment. It's these communities that live next to dirty natural gas power plants, next to these oil refineries, next to crisscrossing freeways, and in the Central Valley, fracking, and in LA and across the state, it's fracking that disproportionately impacts low-income communities and communities of color. And in fact, studies show that 1 in 3 Latinos live in the most impacted, polluted census tracts. 1 in 4 African Americans live in the most dirtiest census tracts. And this is compared to 1 in 14 of the white population. So we really are experiencing an environmental health epidemic in these communities of color. Asthma hospitalization rates are skyrocketing. And so it's people of color that are 1.5 times more likely to die from heart diseases and stroke. And the opportunity ahead of us right now is that California, unlike a lot of other places in the nation, is largely becoming a majority people of color state. And our elected officials are now majority people of color. And in fact, poll after poll shows that people of color are the ones that believe in environmental justice. And in fact, a poll that we recently conducted with some of our allies shows that 90% of Latinos think that climate change is a serious threat to their communities and actually demand action on climate change. Today, we will discuss why any solution to the climate crisis must keep fossil fuels in the ground, embrace a clean, renewable energy future, and ask ourselves how communities of color have the most to lose and the most to gain from our actions. And we have two incredible speakers with us this evening. Kassie Siegel is the director of the Center for Biological Diversity's Climate Law Institute. She develops and implements campaigns for the reduction of greenhouse gas and other air pollution and has been a leader in the fight to keep fossil fuels in the ground. The center is a founding member of Californians Against Fracking, the statewide coalition of more than 200 groups working for a ban on fracking and other extreme extraction, an immediate end to oil and gas production near homes, schools, hospitals, and a rapid phase out of all fossil fuel production in California. Welcome, Kassie. And Mark Jacobson is a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University and the director of its atmosphere and energy program. Jacobson's research focuses on how wind, water, and solar power can be scaled up in cost-effective ways to fulfill our energy demands. In 2009, he co-authored a plan featured on the cover of Scientific American to power the world for all purposes with wind, water, and sunlight, he calls WWS. In 2011, he co-founded the Solutions Project, a group that combines science, business, and culture to develop and implement science-based clean energy plans for the states and countries. And in 2013, he developed an individual WWS energy plan for each of the 50 United States. Please help me in welcoming Kassie and Mark. And I'm going to hand it over to Kassie.
Thank you so much, Strella, and thanks to all of you for coming. It's really great to be here with you tonight for this conversation. Before we start the discussion, Stanford scientist Mark Jacobson will, in a minute here, give us a short presentation on his research showing how we can get to 100% renewable energy in California. And I'm going to start out with just a couple of thoughts about how and why we need to ban fracking and keep fossil fuels in the ground, and why this needs to be an essential part of a just transition to our renewable energy future. We are at the crossroads of climate change here in California. We are viewed around the world as a leader in climate change, and yet we are also the nation's third largest oil-producing state. And those two things just don't go together. We know we have to get to 100% renewable energy future, and we know that we have to leave fossil fuels in the ground to solve the climate crisis. But even if we were at 100% renewables tomorrow, that doesn't itself keep fossil fuels in the ground. And if we woke up tomorrow and every car in California had turned into a Tesla that is charged on rooftop solar, it wouldn't do anything to stop oil production in California. And it wouldn't do anything to stop oil that's produced here from being burned elsewhere and continuing to fuel climate disruption. It wouldn't do anything for the people who are sick because they have oil and gas wells in their communities. And it wouldn't do anything for our beautiful natural wild areas in California or wildlife like the California condor that are threatened by a fracking and drilling boom. Our governor is viewed as a climate leader, and yet he supports increased drilling and fracking. And Jerry Brown is getting ready to head to Paris for the international climate talks. And we need him to do some really hard thinking about his support for fracking. Because if we keep drilling, it's going to undo all the other progress that the government may make on climate change. And it's just not California that's at stake. The governor's support for fracking is a terrible example for the rest of the world. We're here tonight because we know that we can do this. It's possible and it's absolutely necessary to get off of fossil fuels entirely and to embrace a clean energy future. And we can do it in a way that addresses the injustice that is at the heart of this problem. The truth is that climate change poses the most dire threat to the people who did the least to cause it. And they also tend to be the people that benefit the least from the system that's producing it. And as Strella said, overwhelmingly, it's environmental justice communities that are also suffering all the harms from fossil fuel extraction. And this is what it looks like. So in Los Angeles, there's a project in the University Park neighborhood. It's called the Allenco Project, and it's right next to homes. And the children that are growing up in that neighborhood, they're sick. Often every day they have nosebleeds, they're dizzy, they're nauseous. And for 2 years, the people in that community complained to local air officials. They lodged over 250 complaints and nothing was done. Nothing was done about that project until finally a couple of EPA inspectors went out there in response to all the complaints. And when they went out there, they got so nauseous that they almost passed out. And after that happened, the EPA got involved, Senator Barbara Boxer got involved, there were multiple front page stories in the LA Times. And finally, that project was shut down, and it was shut down because of the incredible work of those community members, of the Esperanza Community Housing Corporation, which is on the front lines of this, trying to protect their community, of the Stand LA Coalition that's standing together against neighborhood drilling. It was a Herculean effort. And it's going to have to continue all of that hard work because every day there's a threat that this project is going to reopen. And I'm really optimistic that they're going to keep it shut down because it's so clear that that has to happen so that that community can breathe the same clean air that other people get to breathe. But this is the relatively famous project. This is the one that's had multiple front page LA Times stories. And these drill sites, they're all over Los Angeles and they're all over the world. And they all need to be addressed. We can't fix these interlinked problems of climate and health and justice with baby steps. We have to be honest that solving the problems means really ambitious action. Got to do the shift to 100% renewable energy, and we've got to do it in a way that benefits the people that have been hurt the most. And that means wonderful things like switching to distributed, democratized renewable energy system that creates really good jobs in local communities. It means transforming our transportation system so that it's affordable and it's effective and it actually works for the people who need it the most. But it also means ramping down oil production in California. And we're in the middle of a paradigm shift on this right now. People are realizing that you can't solve the climate crisis and approve the dirty Keystone XL pipeline. And you can't solve it while you're drilling in the Arctic. And you can't, we have got to stop these crazy new schemes for digging up every last reserve of fossil fuels on the planet. And we're doing that and we're making progress. The Keystone pipeline is on hold. Yes. Shell just pulled out of the Arctic after massive opposition. The Obama administration announced that it's canceling further Arctic leases. And And here in California, the crazy new scheme for digging up the last fossil fuels, it's fracking, and it's extreme extraction. But it's also crazy just to continue with current levels of drilling in California. And that's why our coalition, Californians Against Fracking, is working for a ban on fracking and other dangerous drilling, for immediate end to all neighborhood drill sites, and for a rapid phase-off of all fossil fuels. And we're winning here, too. Last November, San Benito County became the first county in California to ban fracking and extreme extraction and all oil and gas wells in residential neighborhoods. How many people here worked on the San Benito campaign? Great. Thank you. Quite a few. Thank you for that. It was an incredible campaign. It was broad. It was inclusive. It was grassroots. And the people of San Benito County won, even though they were outspent by the oil industry more than 20 to 1. And the reason it happened was because years ago, people saw the thumper trucks coming into their community. San Benito County was threatened by proposed developments, by leasing of federal lands for fracking, and they'd seen gas land, and they knew what that meant to their community, and they organized, and they won. We can win, but we have to make Governor Brown see that we can't solve climate while we're continuing fracking and drilling in California, and we can't protect public health when oil companies are allowed to drill at will in California, and that the green transition has to be a just transition. Oil companies love to tell us that we can't do it and it's impossible. And Stanford scientist Mark Jacobson is the person whose research has shown very explicitly that we can. And Mark, I'm sure a lot of people here tonight, like me, have been following your research for a very, very long time and admiring it very much. So thank you for coming, and really looking forward to your presentation and then the discussion.
Oh, thanks so much, Kassie, and thanks so much, Strela, for introducing me and for motivating all of you. I want to talk about today how we can transition to 100% renewable energy for all purposes in California, the United States, and worldwide. And so for all purposes, I mean electricity, transportation, heating and cooling, and industry, as well as in agriculture and forestry and fishing. So I'm going to first motivate. By the way, I should point out, actually, I could give this talk in an hour, but I only have 20 minutes, so it's going to go really fast. So why do we care? I mean, from my point of view, it's an air pollution and climate and energy security point of view worldwide. There are 4 to 7 million people die each year from air pollution, and 20% are children under the age of 5 years old, significantly due to burning of biofuels indoors, in the case of the children, for home heating and cooking. But outdoor air pollution is about half, and indoors about half worldwide. In the United States, it's about 60 to 65,000 per year. In California, it's on the order of 12,000 per year, and primarily in the Central Valley and Los Angeles areas. And this costing in the United States, it's about $500 to $600 billion per year in health costs. And this includes, well, these are from cardiovascular disease, respiratory illness, complications from asthma. So the costs are in terms of higher taxes, higher insurance rates, higher workman's compensation rates, lost work days, lost school days, emergency room visits, and hospitalizations in general. And these costs are avoidable. Climate costs are rising and growing. It's estimated that U.S. emissions alone by 2050 will cost the world about $3.3 trillion per year, and worldwide emissions will cost the world about 15 to 20 trillion dollars per year in climate costs. And right now, we're already experiencing a large portion of those costs. But these are avoidable costs. And then fossil fuels, their prices rise over time because you have to continuously mine, refine, and transport them. And so this is another problem, is price creep of fossil fuels. Eventually, the prices will rise significantly enough that you could have economic, social, and political chaos. as you get down to the last bit of oil, gas, and coal. But we can try to avoid that with clean, renewable energy that has zero fuel costs. That's namely wind, water, and solar power for all purposes. So these are drastic problems that require immediate and drastic solutions. So just to give you an idea of what most of the world looks like outside of North America and Europe, well, this is China. It's an old picture, but this occurs regularly. This is, it's like smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes per day in many cities of the world. And lest you think this is far from home, this is a teenager who died in a car crash in Los Angeles who was a non-smoker. Their lungs, it was equivalent to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes per day in Los Angeles in the 1970s. And so if you live in a big city today, the average lifetime of a person living in a big city is between 6 and 9 months less than if you live in a rural area due to the air pollution itself. And so this is a continuous problem. And by the way, in the United States, of the 60,000, 5,000 deaths per year, about 5,000 are due to natural gas mining, the air pollution associated with natural gas mining, transport, and use. And so it's not a zero emission fuel because you need a lot of fuel. You need a lot of diesel to actually mine it and other types of fuel to actually mine it, transport it, and then there's also the use. And so this is based on the U.S. emission inventories and actually modeling the mortalities associated with specifically natural gas. So it's less than coal in terms of the air pollution impacts, but it's significant, 5,000 deaths per year. Now, worldwide climate effects are growing. This is a map showing from data of the temperature changes compared with the early 1900s. It's the more recent years versus early 1900s, and you can see the temperature change is close to a degree Celsius or Kelvin, which is around 1.6 to 7 Fahrenheit. And most of the impacts are over countries in the northern hemisphere where there's a lot of ice, and also the Arctic as well. Because as you start warming the planet, you melt the Arctic ice and snow over land, and you eventually uncover either the dark ocean below and causing more light to be absorbed by the ocean, or you uncover land, which also is darker than snow, causing a positive feedback of enhancing warming faster than if you just have the same warming over soil originally. So this higher temperatures are causing all sorts of problems. If we melt all the ice worldwide, we would raise sea level 70 meters, and most of that ice is stored in the Antarctic, in the East Antarctic ice sheet, which is about 60 meters worth of ice. And so that would flood 7% of all the land worldwide, and most people live along coastlines in the world, so it would cause extreme devastation. But you can see all the forest fires that are occurring right now worldwide, particularly in Indonesia. Well, this is partly due to the fact that you have a strong El Nino year, and the high pressure over what happens when you have El Nino is you have high pressure coming down from Siberia and camping over Indonesia, and that means it's sunny all the time and it's dry. But you get the overall warmer temperatures of the globe enhance fires. I mean, you can't avoid the fact that when you have slightly higher temperatures on average, when you have an El Nino, that's going to trigger even more forest fires. So the emissions associated with the Indonesian fires just in the last week are equivalent to the entire United States emissions of greenhouse gases. And so it's in addition to all the pollution that's occurring, and I think at least 500,000 people are suffering acute respiratory illness in Indonesia right now. That's just reported, and so unreported is even more significant. So we're having, not only air pollution gets worse because of global warming due to forest fires, but air pollution chemistry, when you have bad air pollution like in Los Angeles or the Central Valley, higher temperatures and the associated higher water vapor associated with higher temperatures enhance air pollution where it's already bad. And that, in fact, was the reason that the U.S. EPA granted California the California waiver back in 2009 because of the impacts of higher temperatures on air quality. And before, under the Bush administration, they had denied California the ability to control its carbon dioxide emissions from vehicles. But based on the science showing that higher temperatures actually increase ozone and other pollutants in California, the waiver was granted, allowing California to become the first entity in the United States to control CO2 emissions. Now, so there's higher air pollution, there's higher heat stress, and other types of mortality. So, well, enough about the problems. How do we solve these problems? But actually, one more slide on problems that will, I'm not quite through with problems. But I want to motivate, why do we want to convert to clean renewable energy as opposed to just putting more emission controls on cars and power plants? Well, if we look at net global warming, we see on the right, that's the net warming of or close to a degree Celsius, and there it's about 0.8 in that figure. But on the left is a contribution of greenhouse gases, which causes more warming than is actually observed. And then fossil fuel and biofuel soot particles, which are like from diesel exhaust and jet fuel and kerosene burning, you get particles that you can see in the air. I mean, you don't see gases in the air except for nitrogen dioxide, but all the pollution you see is particles, or at least 95%. And the dark particles, black and brown carbon, they absorb sunlight, heat the air 1 million times more powerfully than carbon dioxide. But there's a lot less black carbon in the air than carbon dioxide. But it turns out black carbon is the second leading cause of global warming after carbon dioxide. But it has such a short lifetime in the atmosphere because it gets removed by rainfall that if you stop its emissions, you can actually control temperatures quite readily. And it causes about 20% of global warming. So it's, in fact, controlling black carbon is the only way you could possibly save the Arctic sea ice at this point. Because if you control all the CO2 today, it'll take decades before a fraction of that CO2 comes out of the atmosphere. But if you control all the black carbon today, you can get temperature effects within 1 to 3 years. But methane also is you need to control for saving the Arctic sea ice. So you really need to, because that has a lifetime of 8 to 12 years. But natural gas emits both black carbon through flaring and methane through leakage. And so when we talk about transition, natural gas is a transition fuel. It's a transition fuel to nowhere, because really what it's doing is it's just speeding up the destruction of the Arctic sea ice, which once that's gone, you'll have a faster positive feedback of heating the rest of the planet. But anyway, the point I want to make here is that you see the net global warming due to fossil fuel soot and biofuel soot and greenhouse gases exceeds the observed warming. That's because you have a lot of other pollution particles that are cooling particles that are from sulfur and nitrogen and from ammonia and some organic material plus water that not only reflect light but also enhance cloudiness and offset about half of warming. So half of global warming is being hidden right now due to air pollution particles, and the combination of all air pollution particles are 90% of the cause of the 4 to 7 million deaths per year worldwide. So, one strategy, if we just if we don't eliminate the particles, we're going to allow air pollution to continue and deaths to continue. But if we control all the particles, we're actually going to double global warming. So the only way to solve this problem is to eliminate all the greenhouse gases and the particles simultaneously. You have to get rid of, you can't just ratchet down, one strategy, you could just ratchet down all the fossil fuel soot and you save health problems, reduce health problems and climate problems simultaneously, but that's only part of the problem. That doesn't control the greenhouse gases. If you just put particle traps on all the vehicles and power plants, then you actually warm the planet, because it's ironic that actually all the sulfur from coal is actually offsetting half of global warming, even though it's killing people because of the particles. So it's really a messy problem, but there's only one solution, is to eliminate all the emissions. And so that's what I want to talk about. How do you eliminate the emissions? So the idea here is to electrify everything, all sectors of the energy economy, because electricity is more efficient than internal combustion, and it's cleaner if you can actually generate the electricity from clean renewable energy. So the idea here is, well, I'm going to talk about 4 sectors here: electricity, transportation, heating, cooling, and industry. So for electricity, we would eliminate all coal, natural gas, oil, even nuclear power, and I'm sorry to say actually biomass emissions, because when you have biomass, you still have burning and you still have air pollution. So we want to eliminate all air pollution and all climate problems simultaneously. Nuclear is not included in this because it causes 9 to 25 times more emissions of greenhouse gases and air pollutants per kilowatt hour than wind power, and half of that is due to the fact that you have to refine uranium. It's a very energy intensive process, and if you use the regular electric power grid in the United States, in fact, in the US, there are 2 coal-fired power plants whose sole purpose is to refine uranium for nuclear weapons and energy. And so but the other half of the problem is that it takes so long to put up a nuclear plant between 10 and 19 years between planning and operation compared to 2 to 5 years for a wind or solar farm, that while you're waiting around, you're burning the regular electric power grid. So the next nuclear power plant that goes up, the Arctic ice will already be gone. And so it's really just such, so you're not only emitting while you're waiting around for it, but the problem of climate change is getting worse and worse. Well, there are a lot of other issues associated with it, which I don't have time to go into. But we do believe, based on a study done since 2009 and some subsequent studies, that wind, onshore and offshore wind, photovoltaics, solar photovoltaics, either on rooftops or in power plants, concentrated solar power, primarily in deserts and high solar regions, which are coupled with storage, geothermal power, hydroelectric, existing hydroelectric, so we're not proposing new growth of hydro, just using existing hydro, and some tiny amounts of tidal and wave power. This can power the whole world, in fact, for all purposes. Transportation, we'd use these electric power sources to provide electricity that was stored in batteries, in electric vehicles, and to produce hydrogen, either for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles or for aircraft, some cryogenic hydrogen battery hybrids. And for heating, cooling, again, we'd electrify everything with air source, ground source, water source heat pumps, some electric resistance heating, and solar hot water preheating. But these are all existing technologies, nothing new. For industry, again, we'd use existing technologies, but everything would be electrified, either electric resistance, arc furnaces, induction furnaces, dielectric heating, and also some hydrogen for some processes. So everything here is run on the electric power sector. But we do need some storage because the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So what are the types of storage? For electricity, we'd use concentrated solar power with solar storage, either could be molten nitrate salt or a phase change material, which would actually be more efficient. Pumped hydro, the existing pumped hydro, and planned or proposed pumped hydro, which is where you use excess electricity to pump water up a hill. Then when you need the electricity, you let it drain down the hill and run a turbine. Existing hydroelectric power, it's a big battery, so you can just turn it on and off when you need electricity